we'll go ahead and recognize Mr. Desaulniers for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. Ms. Bresch, you talked about your outreach in state legislatures. Did you spend any money or your company on lobbying or helping with that process?
Yes, yes.
Do you remember how much?
I don't remember exact number, but I would say minimal in the scope of what we've spent on awareness and access. But that outreach and lobbying was for the epinephrine, to be able to have it in the school's name and not a child's name, not
so
EpiPens.
when that product is reached its life expectancy, do the schools purchase it from you to replace it?
We give it every year free.
Every year for free?
Yes.
All right. Your quote in terms of you're accepting some responsibility, and I read here, is, looking back, I wish we had better anticipated the magnitude and the acceleration of the rising financial issues for a growing minority of patients. We never...
A price, and we've tried to balance price and access while at the same time continuing to have access in more places. Like I said, I hope the other 65,000 schools that we can get free EpiPens to them. I'm also proud of the hearing and understanding this growing minority of patients and the uninsured or people facing that high out-of-pocket, that we took immediate action to put the generic out there, which is unprecedented, as well as some of the actions from the tripling the copay card or raising the eligibility of the patient assistance.
Okay, appreciate that. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes from a Los Angeles Times story, August 25th. This is quotes, Mylan, the profiteering, tax dodging, this is the Los Angeles Times, drug company currently taking immense heat for jacking up the price of EpiPen by 500%, announced Thursday that it will help more patients cover their soaring out-of-pocket costs for the allergy drug device. That's good for some individual, the LA Times continues, patients and families, but at the heart it's a cynical move that actually protects the company's profits and harms the healthcare system. As I explained before, the author continues, that's because such moves, often marketing schemes dressed up to look like altruism. And then he goes on to explain, are you familiar with this article in the LA Times?
No.
Okay. No one ever showed you this? He goes on to say, what Mylan is doing is expanding its patient assistance program by providing eligible patients with a savings card worth up to $500 per prescription and doubling eligibility to households earning up to 400% of the federal poverty level, or $97,000. Many of them, therefore, would pay nothing out of pocket for the device. The truth is, however, that these programs are detested by insurers, healthcare economists, and government agencies with good reason. In fact, they're illegal when applied to Medicare and Medicaid patients because they may violate federal anti-kickback laws, which bar payments made to induce patients to choose particular services. Insurers and government programs will have to cover everything beyond the copay at a price that can be as much as $600 a pack. So you're not familiar with any of this, either the article or what he's ascribing to your motives.
And which is why we went the step of putting a generic in the marketplace, so that we could make sure we touched every patient and tried to make sure every access point was covered. So by putting the generic in and dropping the wholesale cost to $300, we believe went certainly beyond, and again, to reach and provide access to as many patients as we can.
Okay. In this article, he quotes a healthcare economist from Emory University, David Howard, and he talks about what you're doing as programs that are triple boon for manufacturers. They increase demand, allow companies to charge a higher price, and provide public relations benefits. The manufacturer's costs look high in absolute terms, but the payoff is even greater. Manufacturers can afford to pay a lot for of $25 or $50 copayments. So, again, the answer to this is the generic. Is it changing the dynamics?
Completely.
And how long did you have the previous practice before you changed to the generic?
We still have the patient assistant program and the copays for the brand, but by introducing the generic, we hope that it's, we hope there's 85, 88% generic utilization of the generic.
How long did you have the profits under the old system before you switched to the generic? It sounds like you did it for altruistic purposes. This article would portray it in a different way.
Well, and Congressman, what at least the parts that you were reading, I think, go to the patient assistant program, or the copay is what they were giving their description of, versus the generic. They didn't speak about
Yeah, but my point is that you're making it sound like you introduced the generic for purely altruistic purposes. The way he describes it was a business practice that took advantage of the situation for some period of time.
The generic, putting the generic in is, like I said, an unprecedented move so that we could reach as many patients.
That's not the question. I believe in redemption, so I'll give you the generic. But prior to that, you were making money off the situations the LA Times described. So my question is, how long did you do that?
I don't agree with the LA Times description of the programs or our process, and I don't think they spoke about the generic program that we've now announced. Like I said, we have invested with the point of wanting to reach more patients. If we're now reaching almost 3 million patients, that's 2 million more that are protected and hopefully much better, in a much better position if an anaphylactic event occurs, aside from the school program, again, because so many people have allergic events that had never had a known allergy. So
my time has gone by, but I just say, from this article and other articles, I didn't bother to quote the USA Today article or the Market Watch article, that you had a business practice that was immensely profitable. You've admitted to that, and you have changed it. But it seems as if you've changed it in anticipation of what the public has responded to. So with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. We now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think, Ms. Bresch, you've had a lot of questions today and a lot of pressure put on you. I appreciate you coming. I'm personally very hesitant to go down the path of government getting involved in what individuals make and can't make. This is a free enterprise system, and I get very worried when we start going down that tree. My concern is where the bottleneck is occurring, and Dr. Throckmorton, I'd like to ask you, an abbreviated new drug application, as I understand it, is an application when companies want to manufacture a generic drug. That's what they must utilize. Is that correct?
For a true generic. So
Sure.
an authorized generic like we've been talking about up to now, that's not approved under that
Okay,
statute.
but a true generic. Do you know how many abbreviated new drug applications are currently pending with the FDA?
We have 1,700 responses that we've sent back to sponsors requesting additional information. We're waiting for that information to come back. There are other applications that are in-house that we're reviewing, again, on the timeline that we've discussed earlier.
It's my understanding that the generic applications submitted to the FDA are outpacing those applications that are approved 3 to 1. Is that correct?
I can't verify that number. There are 2,300 applications before the agency, and this
2,400?
2,300.
Yeah, okay, you
This
just
year,
said
we've
1,400.
approved 600 products through the middle of this year.
Okay, could you verify for me, could you get the numbers back to us, what the number of applications submitted versus those that are being approved? And can you tell me the median approval time for generic drugs right now?
I don't have that information before me. It's also changing. So in the period before GDUFA 1, before we got the User Fee Act,
I'm talking
those times
about now. I would like that information as well.
I'd offer to get you the trend if I could. I think that would probably be more useful.
Okay, because the Generic Pharmaceutical Association says it's taking 47 months.
Yeah.
It's taking 4 years.
Yeah, that's simply misunderstanding. And I'd be happy
What do
to
you
clear-
mean that's misunderstanding? Is
47 months is from the beginning of GDUFA 1, from the beginning of the User Fee Act. So any products that are being approved now that have been
all right, from beginning of the process to the end of the process, are you disputing that it takes 4 years?
I'm disputing that for products that come in today, it will not take 47 months.
Well, I mean, you can make all sorts of promises. I'm talking about realistically, for those who have been trying, they've been trying for 4 years from the time they start to the time they finish.
There are products that come in and are sometimes insufficient to get approval. Sometimes that's because the data that they've submitted aren't appropriate.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't want to run around the bush. I'm trying to find out how long does it take from beginning to end? And from those that have been involved in the process, they're telling us it takes 4 years. Now, since 2012, the generic manufacturers, of course, have been paying fees to the tune of billions of dollars to try to speed the process up through the generic drug user fee agreement. And this past July, as I understand it, the FDA actually said that they had acted on more than 90% of the generic applications. I'm assuming that's a little bit of what you're referring to now.
That's the backlog, the applications that have been submitted to us.
The backlog is 90%?
Prior to the beginning of GDUFA 1, there was a total of around 4,600 applications that we needed to review. We've acted on more than 90% of those. In fact, there are fewer than 100 of them that have not gotten a response.
All right, so are you saying of the 4,600, there's only 100 left, that 4,500 have been approved?
Less than 100 of them remain to have a response. Again, some of those products that have a full dossier, have given us the data that we need, have been approved or given tentative approval. Products that are not sufficient, that haven't met the data needs for us, I don't think you'd want us to rubber stamp those.
No, I don't want to rubber stamp, but the process is bottlenecked. That is the frustrating. The free enterprise system works when you've got multiple companies out there offering products and options for people. We have a scenario now that EpiPen basically, you've got 94% of the market, whatever, and you're the only major player. And the reason for that is because you guys are not processing a host of others who are trying to get in the market, and when it's taking 3, 4, 5 years for that to occur, and who knows how many millions of dollars to go through the process, I mean, no wonder the whole system is not working.
I'd like to show you the trend data. That is not the trend that we're seeing for the cohort that are being, the applications.
The European counterpart only has 24 generic drugs awaiting approval, and they do it from beginning to end in less than a year. That is not what we're experiencing here.
The European system is quite different from ours.
Well, it must be, because it's not taking nearly as long as ours does.
I would say they are apples and oranges to try to compare, honestly.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my time's expired, and I yield back. But yes, we've got tremendous concerns with the drug going from $100 to $600, and there's issues that y'all have got to deal with. But we can't place all the blame on you. The FDA has got to get their act together and start working the process and getting this thing going through. And I look forward to receiving the information that you said you would send. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Heiss. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh, for 5 minutes.
A couple of preliminary matters. First of all, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, thank you for having this hearing, and I thought your opening statements set the right tone. What is it in the market that's broken that is causing these prices to be increased? Also, Mr. Heiss is asking about whether there's something we can do with the FDA and the approval process. I'm all in if there are things we can do that won't compromise safety. Second, full disclosure, Mylan has an excellent production facility in St. Albans, Vermont. Many Vermonters work there and very proud of it, good wages, and it's a good employer. And then third, what drug companies do, I totally agree, is vitally important. You know, my first wife had cancer, 9 years, and medications extended her life and alleviated her suffering. So it's important that get it right. But here's the dilemma, and it's best summed up by a letter that I received. We all got a lot of them from a person in Essex Junction. My 4-year-old son has a severe peanut allergy, and I'm a single mother working a low-wage job with little health care coverage. I can't afford to pay this much for EpiPens, and I can't afford not to, because that cost is possibly his life. So the heart of the matter here is that moms and dads are being given a Hobson's choice. They can pay more than they can afford, or they can risk a loss they cannot endure. And that's why it's so urgent that we work together to get to the bottom of this. And I want to focus my questions on some of what I think are the market breakdowns for lack of competition. And again, Mr. Heiss, I acknowledge the FDA, maybe we got to make some reforms there, but there's some things that are happening. When your company bought the EpiPen, the company and got the EpiPen, that was in 07, I think, right?
Yes.
And how many EpiPens were sold then?
Much less than today. I think it was, it was certainly less than half of what we
Probably
sell
way
today.
less than half, right? I have a question about the basic economics. Usually when you sell more of something, the per unit cost goes down. Is that not the case with EpiPen?
So, no, cost of goods has gone up every year, and our investment has continued. We've continued to invest in the
All right,
product.
so you're going to
And-
give us, you'll give us the figures on that. Because I understand you're saying it's $50 that is the money in your pocket, which sounds like it would be reasonable, but as you can tell from a lot of the questions, there's a lot of head scratching going on here about that.
I totally appreciate that, and I appreciate there's been a lot of misinformation, understandably so, given the complexity, as many of you have pointed out, in the system.
Well, I'm going to ask you to get your graph out that you gave us, where the wholesale acquisition price is $608. That's what people are paying.
Yep.
And then you got down at the bottom, it's $50 for the profit per pen.
Yes.
That $50 sounds reasonable, but the rebates and allowances, who's getting all that money?
So that is between the other people in the supply chain, the pharmacy benefit managers, retail
But,
pharmacy,
okay.
wholesalers,
Isn't the service
and insurers.
Isn't the service that a pharmacy benefit manager provides essentially to negotiate a best price with the pharmaceutical companies to get a given drug? And they get a rebate, right?
Probably be better to have a PBM, but philosophically, I
work with-
think that the pharmacy manager, the system, that is,
No, but I'm not talking philosophically. We're all trying to understand like how it works. So the PBM buys huge quantities of drug A, B, or C, and then they get a discount from from Pfizer or from you, and they keep some of that, and it's the way they make their money. And part of their way of negotiating is with a so-called formulary, right? So if you have heart disease, there might be an option of drug A, B, or C, and they put on the formulary drug A, and there's increased volume there, and they get a rebate, right? With respect to epinephrine, there's no formulary. If you're having anaphylactic shock, there's only one thing you need, and it's the product that you sell.
no, there has been competition, as we've said throughout the years.
All right, but
I think
not-
this is, if I only could just get this point, AveQ, which launched their product at the end of 2013, so we did have to face formulary choices of not even being on the formulary due to the competition in the marketplace.
Oh, but somehow you've ended up with 94% or 97% of the market.
But I would ask that people recognize our product and that it is more complicated. AveQ was completely recalled off the market for safety reasons, which is a very rare event.
No, I understand that, but in this graph, I mean, what is just impossible to understand is how does something cost $608 when the company that sells it is only making $50, and that is hard to understand.
And I understand how complicated and how head-scratching that is, which is why, I've said I would welcome the opportunity to sit down. I know this
All
is
right.
about EpiPen,
I
but
don't
look
have
at the
much time,
system.
so I'll have to keep going. This is hammering that Vermonter who has that Hobson's choice, but it's also very tough on taxpayers. Our Medicaid program in 2011 was paying $111 per script, and we spent in Vermont, and this is a lot of money for us. We spent then $111. Now it's $557. We went from $256,000 of taxpayer money to $1.7 million. That's tough. I mean, it really is tough.
And look, and that's why the generic, being able to put it into the market, that would help lower healthcare healthcare cost across the board.
Right, but the generic, what I understand, it used to be the position that you had, Mylan had, is that doing these authorized generics was a real threat to the generic industry. That's the public record of your point of view.
A decade ago, and I know that this is complicated, but the authorized generics of keeping a first generic or competing with the generic, in this instance, that's not this case, but
Just, if I can just go on a little bit, one other thing. The cost of EpiPen in the Netherlands is $105, and that's where your corporate headquarters are. How do they get 105, and you moved your headquarters from the U.S. to the Netherlands? How is it they get to buy it for $105, and we pay $608?
Sir, I'm not sure of the cost, but what I would say is they have a completely different system.
I guess I yield back.
We would appreciate some clarification on that, but now we do have a pharmacist, I believe the only pharmacist in the House and the Senate. Pleased to have him on this committee. We'll now recognize him, Mr. Carter of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, before I start, can I inquire of you, the witnesses took an oath and they're still under oath now?
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make sure. Ms. Bresch, have you ever seen a, excuse me, a child have an anaphylactic shock? Have you ever witnessed that?
I haven't.
Excuse me. You have not?
No.
Have you ever gone up to a pharmacy counter and carried, a pack of 2 epinephrines and 2 EpiPens and told a mother of a child who has had anaphylactic shock, who has an allergy, that the price of that's going to be $600?
No.
Have you ever seen a mother cry because she can't afford the medication for her child? Well, the reason I ask you this, Ms. Bresch, is because I've experienced it. I've seen this. I've seen a mother go out and have to call family members to see if she can get the money together to try and see if she can pay for this medication that she knows her child has to have. I've witnessed that firsthand. None of us are without blame here, Ms. Bresch. None of us. And I include my profession as well. Let me ask you a couple of yes or no questions. First of all, the 608 wholesale acquisition cost, is that AWP?
No, sir.
So it's just wholesale acquisition?
Yes.
Okay. Wholesale acquisition cost is $608. You said that your company receives approximately $274, is that right, after rebates and allowances?
Correct.
Okay, so after you take out the expenses like manufacturing, acquisition costs, packing, regulatory compliance, all of those things, your profit is even less than that, is that correct?
Correct. That would be the $50 per pen.
Okay. So after you do that, Ms. Bresch, do you have any contracts with PBMs? Does Mylan have any contracts with any pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs?
Yes.
You do have contracts with PBMs?
Yes.
Okay, can you describe some of those contracts for me very briefly?
The contracts are around products, multiple products, to participate on the formulary so patients have access to the products.
Okay, so we established earlier that over half of the list price does not go to Mylan. Do you know how much the PBM receives?
I don't have a breakdown between the channels, but that's where showing that between those.
I understand, but do you know specifically how much the PBM, the pharmacy benefits manager, receives?
I don't specifically know the breakdown between those 4 buckets, between the PBMs, the pharmacy, the insurers, or the wholesalers.
Nor do I, and I'm the pharmacist, and I don't know either. In fact, nobody knows. That's the problem. Nobody knows how much of this is going to the pharmacy benefits manager because there is no transparency. That's the problem. Do you know how much the PBM receives in rebates and other fees that are related to the EpiPen whenever one is adjudicated through a pharmacy?
I don't.
You don't. Nor do I. All I know is that my computer calls the insurance, and they tell me how much I'm supposed to charge the patient. I don't know how much you're getting as a manufacturer. I don't know how much the insurance company's getting. I don't know how much the PBM's getting. That's where transparency comes in. That's what we need. Do you know how much of the EpiPen savings, the related savings and rebates that the PBM gives back to Mylan? You said you had contracts with PBMs. How much do you get back from the PBM?
I don't know. I don't.
Remember, you're under oath. Do you know how much you get back in rebates from a PBM?
I just don't want to give you an inaccurate number. I agree that we have contracts.
Do you know? Can you provide us with that information, Mr. Chairman? Can I ask for that information?
Absolutely.
I'll certainly go back and look at that. I'm just saying I don't want to give an inaccurate number to you.
Okay, so you don't know how much the PBM receives or keeps for itself. Nor do I, nor does anyone else, whether it's the manufacturer, the insurer, or the pharmacist. None of us know. What we do know is this. Prescription drug prices have soared, and so have the profits of PBMs. They are in the billions of dollars. Until we have more transparency in the PBM market, we're going to continue to see these kind of cost increase. We're going to continue to see this. That's why we need bills like House Resolution 244. My good friend, Representative Doug Collins from Georgia, has introduced this bill dealing with the MAC transparency. It's called the MAC Transparency Act. This would help us and take a step towards transparency. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for holding this hearing today, and I want to reiterate my request that I have made to you and to this committee from time to time about further investigating how deceptive practices by PBMs are impacting drug prices. Would you agree with that, Ms. Bresch?
I certainly would agree that transparency is needed. For the healthcare system has evolved dramatically over the last decade, and I'm sure as you've seen as a pharmacist, that the system hasn't kept pace with this evolution of the healthcare system. And
the system hasn't kept pace.
how
PBMs have had billions of dollars in profits. Yet
that's why
I have to sit there and take a prescription to the counter to a mother whose child has suffered from anaphylactic shock and watch her cry and watch her have to call family members in order to get the money to pay for this medication. And we don't know where it's going. You say it's not going to you. Where is it going? I need to tell her.
And so
I need to tell her where that money's going.
the most immediate thing I could do was put a generic into the market. And
Don't go there. You know I know better than that. That is wholly, that is a crock, and you know that I know that. It is. There is no difference whatsoever. Ms. Bresch,
we
don't.
cut the price.
You cut the price in half. Do not do that to me. Don't try to convince me that you are doing us a favor here. You are not doing a favor by that. You could have dropped the price of EpiPens just as well. But instead, you said, no, we're going to make a generic.
But to the
No.
point of the wholesale acquisition cost of getting to those patients and making the difference, to your point, to make sure everyone who needs an EpiPen has one, I couldn't ensure by the wholesale acquisition cost on the branded side, this channel, that would get to all the...
You did not want to cut the price on the EpiPen brand, whatever you want to call it, because you wouldn't have gotten your rebates from the PBMs like you get them now. I'm waiting for the information that you have promised me that you will send to this committee. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hold her to that.
And, sir, what I can tell you is that to bypass this, the most immediate thing that we could do was to put a generic in, because it bypassed the formulary, the everything you're just describing.
Are you getting a rebate on those generics from the PBMs? Are you getting a rebate on the generic version of EpiPen from the PBMs?
Those are still under negotiation. We haven't done those arrangements yet because we're launching.
But are you planning on getting a rebate? Are you planning on getting a rebate from the PBM for the generic version of EpiPen that you are introducing?
I don't know. I honestly don't know how.
Remember the oath. I'll tell the truth.
I'm not negotiating those, but I can tell you As you know, the formularies, the PBMs and the generics, it's very different than on the brand side of the house.
Well, the gentleman, I know
the
that he doesn't have any more
channels.
time, but I just want to help clarify something.
I yield.
And this is to help. I just want to take just one step further. Do you know what you get from the PBMs for the regular EpiPen? How much rebates? The gentleman was talking about that. And do you?
That's what I said. I don't want to give an inaccurate
And you can,
number
but you
of
can
what-
get us that information?
Well, I absolutely will go back
Okay.
and work on that
And
information.
two, you expect to be getting rebates from the generic, is that right?
It's
Yes or
just-
no?
He asked specifically about the PBM, and I don't want to give an inaccurate
But
answer.
I didn't ask you that. I said, are you getting,
We pay rebates. We pay rebates on the generic as well. And
That's not what he's talking about. You know what he's
But I
talking
know,
about.
but I can't sit here today and tell you what comes back on the generic. What I can tell you is that there's discounts and rebates paid, but it's a much smaller degree on the generic.
Mr. Chairman, reclaiming my time, this is a shell game. That's all it is. Ms. Bresch, I hope you never have the experience of going to a counter and telling a mother of a child who has suffered from anaphylactic shock that she needs to pony up with $600. I hope you never experience that, Ms. Bresch. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Bresch, when could we expect that this committee to have that information? It was asked by Mr. Carter. What's reasonable?
I have no.
You're the CEO. You got how many employees?
Yeah, no, yes, I'm not sure what's asking or how, I don't want to.
You don't know what
promise
he's
something.
asking? You want him to ask again?
No, I know what he's asking about what it takes to give you that information, but we will do it as soon as possible.
I'm asking you what a reasonable date is. A week? Can you get that to us in a week?
10 days?
Okay, 10 days. Yes, 10 days. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's now recognize Ms. Watson-Coleman for a generous 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be here all day, and I may ask you some questions that have already been asked. So I want to talk about sort of the company and how generous it is and what a good life it seems to be associated with being associated with the company. Your perks in particular aren't limited to just an astronomical salary and stock benefits. You also have access to the company jet. Is that true?
Yes.
Mylan's public filings list the amount of money that you spent on the company's jet. In 2015, you spent $310,000, and in 2014, you spent $319,000. Does that sound correct?
I
Does
believe
that
that
sound
sounds correct.
Did you fly here today?
Earlier in the week, not
Did-
today.
okay.
Yes, I flew, but just not today.
And did you flew on the private jet?
I did.
And were you accompanied by anybody?
Other employees?
That's a yes, or you asking
Yes.
me?
No, I'm saying other employees accompanied me.
Okay. Do you have any idea how much that cost?
Look, I know that it's fortunate, and it's for efficiency and safety, and yes,
Let me
we
ask you another
understand.
question. From where did you fly?
From Pittsburgh,
From Pittsburgh? Is that where you're located?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, it is a little stunning to see that so much money could be spent on your traveling around in a jet when we're having this discussion here about whether or not Americans are being bilked for a life-saving drug like EpiPen. I know the importance of EpiPen because when I was a legislator in the state of New Jersey, we voted legislation to make sure that all the schools had it. And so I was sort of very interested in your response to Mr. Welsh. If this drug use had increased so very much, wouldn't there have then been an associated decrease in the cost to people because it was so widely used? That's just the economies of scales, but apparently that's not the case. I want to talk a little bit about the company and some of its tax benefits, because I think I want to participate in the backdrop of a picture here. We know that you've profited from increasing the price of EpiPen, but this company has also increased its profits in another way, and that's by taking advantage of a tax loophole. particularly the tax inversion, which involves a company moving its official headquarters abroad to lower the amount of taxes they pay in the United States. In 2014, Mylan moved its official headquarters to the Netherlands. Is that true?
Yes.
You wrote in a letter to shareholders about the tax inversion, and I quote, "The transaction also is expected to lower Mylan's adjusted tax rate, currently forecasted to be approximately 24 to 25% in 2014, to approximately 20 to 21% in the first full year after the consummation of the transaction, and to the high teens thereafter." What was Mylan's company-wide effective tax rate in 2014?
I believe it was in the mid-20s to low 20s before we inverted.
What is it today?
It's between 15 to 17%.
So, from our perspective, last year, hardworking Americans had to pay 25% on all amounts that they've earned over $38,000. But Mylan, which, according to the SEC filings, had earnings in 2014 to close to $1 billion, you pay lower tax rate than many individuals who are struggling and who are possibly parents who need access to those drugs for their children. Did you lower the cost of the EpiPens since Mylan would be saving so much in taxes by this move?
So the 15 to 17% is our global tax rate. I mean, that's after averaging everything out. So we, in the United States, are still paying higher taxes on everything that we sell in the United States.
From the benefit that you derive from moving your headquarters, did you lower the EpiPen cost here in this country?
We're still paying taxes
That's
here in
a
this
yes or a
country,
no,
are
ma'am?
higher taxes.
So that's a no or a yes, or that would be no?
We did not lower.
Okay. According to an article in the Washington Post, as a result of this tax inversion, some Mylan executives based in the U.S. face higher personal tax liability related to stock that they received as part of their compensation. That same article stated that Mylan paid you more than $5 million to cover these taxes. So while Mylan skirted its tax liability and left our country, leaving hardworking Americans to foot this bill, you didn't have to worry because Mylan paid more than $5 million to cover your personal taxes. That's really hard to deal with and hard to believe. You are the CEO of Mylan, right?
Yes.
When Mylan moved its official headquarters abroad, did you move to the Netherlands?
No.
According to your website, and I quote, "The chief executive officer and other executive officers of Mylan NV carry out the day-to-day conduct of Mylan's NV worldwide business at the company's principal offices in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania." Is that true?
Yes.
So is there's anything more than a virtual office in the Netherlands so that you could claim to be a tax purpose resident there?
We are now domiciled in the Netherlands and run our global business. But physically, yes, we work out of Canonsburg.
So basically, you're running the business out of Canonsburg. So you simply moved your address to another country so that you didn't have to pay at the tax rate in this country. At the same time, you present this drug, this life-saving drug, at this increased cost to families who can barely afford it. It sounds to me like this is really a sham and a shell, and it's very sad to hear this. Do you really think that it's fair that you don't have to pay the taxes as a U.S. company?
So again, we do pay taxes here in the United States for all of the sales of all the revenue that we receive here in the United States. So we are absolutely paying our taxes for everything that we sell here in the United States.
The one thing I get is that you all are very smart about avoiding responsibility and straightforwardness. You know, but there's a bill that could close the loophole that you have your virtual office over in the Netherlands and claim to be resident for tax purposes, and that's the Stop Corporate Inversions Act of 2015, which was introduced in January of last year. And I'm sorry to say that my Republican colleagues have failed to act on it. But I think that having had a hearing as of this nature, we can expect, I think, to have more attention to this matter. And with that, I thank you for the generosity of time, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Lujan Grisham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too want to thank the ranking member and the chairman for bringing this hearing together and having you. Unfortunately, it's not our first hearing on such matters. I mean, we are talking and dealing with Turing and Valiant and Mylan and Gilead and seeing a really disturbing pattern where Congress provides a variety of mechanisms to invest in innovation and pharmaceutical companies so that we get the right public health treatments and medicines. And we also have innovations. And we give you patent protections, we give you R&D money, and what we get in return is now a monopoly using your generic aspect in a way that we did not intend, and have a hearing where we're not going to get any relief. You've made it clear that you're following the rules, you're completely justified, and the amount of money that you're both spending on salaries and bonuses and infrastructure and acquisitions is all justified while you're making $1 billion on a drug that most people can't afford with a patient assistance program that most drug companies created in the 90s so that as drug prices went up, policymakers would hesitate before dealing with price legislation that would make it fair to consumers. Because the problem is, if you're a consumer and you have to have it because it's life-saving, it's already unfair. Because we're going to have to do whatever we need. And quite frankly, my constituents aren't so happy about a prescription drug assistance program. Nobody wants to give you their tax returns or their Social Security number or tell you over the phone what their income is or provide you those income statements. And I don't know what you pay for those staff to provide those, to do that evaluation. The reality is, just don't do it. Make the drugs affordable. And you create an environment where you have preferences and you make sure that it's on the preventative drug list. So I think instead of having any more conversations, I mean, I don't think that we've gotten very many of our questions answered because, in fact, Mr. Chairman, it is true. It is very complicated. We've created an environment where they don't have to be transparent, so they aren't. Let me give you an example where what we thought, what we intended in terms of policymaking with generics and competition worked. In 10 years, when we decided that as a public health issue, we should have, to your point, have defibrillators in all public places because we want to save people's lives. We know that vehicle creates an opportunity where laypersons can help administer that level of care and prevent a person from dying from a heart attack. And in 10 years, by having 6 companies effectively compete, we've dropped those prices of defibrillators by about 2/3. Unfortunately, that's an anomaly. Today, we're seeing price increases in therapeutic equivalents, in generics. We're seeing longer patent protections. We negotiated longer patent protections in 21st century cures. So I would suggest that today, while we have bipartisan now support and real interest in protecting our consumers, that maybe it's time that this committee lead the effort. Let's join up with Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce, and here's some ideas. I think it's time to consider allowing FDA to look at price increases when they're and then ask them to include that when they prioritize generic applications. I propose that maybe we need a price protection program for public health drugs, and that we need to decide a public formulary. There's no formulary for the EpiPen. You've got it. A formulary works when there's competition. There are different drugs on that formulary for high blood pressure or insulin. You don't need a formulary. You're it. And you're it, except that in Canada and all over Europe, your drug is much cheaper. So I think we should import those drugs right back. We paid you to figure out the device, the application, the drug. Now we're protecting you with a generic. We're allowing you to do patient assistance programs under the guise of trying to make sure that it's affordable. We create rebates and very complicated, you pay them, they pay you back. I say let's demystify it. Let's make sure that Congress puts in real patient protection programs to prevent companies like yours from taking advantage of every policy aspect that was intended to make affordable health care. And quite frankly, as long as I'm on this rant, I'm tired of paying prescription drug companies and drug manufacturers and device companies to treat these issues. If we put the same kind of money that we're allowing you to keep to deal with curing allergies, we wouldn't be having this conversation about an EpiPen, would we? So I say we shift it instead of trying to, pull out information where I agree, I think you've been far less than transparent. And I think we ought to do transparency legislation. I think there's a whole host of ideas where we could lead instead of being dragged down this path where we're upset for our constituents when none of these prices on their own at these companies' hands will shift. They certainly haven't. Pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and PBMs, where you tried to shift to PBMs, they are all making incredible profits in an environment where that profit-making environment has all been at the hands of policymakers trying to create a competitive, innovative, private sector, high-quality investment to protect Americans. And instead, we've created that access around the world, and we've left Americans holding, if you will, the financial bag. And I, for one, am tired of that. So I don't need any answers because I won't get any that are fair from you or your company, but I'm expecting Congress now to take a much different leadership role, and I thank my colleagues on this committee and the leadership by the ranking member and the chairman, because maybe, because of your greed and the other companies, maybe you finally put Congress into a position where bipartisan, we will have the courage to finally do what's right for our constituents. I have that courage. I believe my colleagues do too. I yield back.
Thank the gentlewoman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Gothman.
I'm out of breath. I just got here. Okay. First of all, for you, Mr. Throckmorton, and maybe somebody's asked this question. If they've asked it, just say, go to the next question. Have we figured out why the market is not working and why other companies are not marketing these things and undercutting Mylan?
There is another product that's being marketed. Why it's not marketed more broadly, why these increases in prices, I think is the question you're asking, isn't it?
Right, right. Is the other product at lower cost?
I'm told that that product is lower price, yes.
Okay, maybe we don't want Ms. Bresch to pitch the competition, but you do have competition. You've only got 94, 96% of the market, right?
That's our current market share, but there's been products in and out of this marketplace over the years. So, and as
Are there products in the marketplace today?
pardon me?
Are there products in the marketplace today?
Yes, yes.
And are they lower priced than your product?
There's a Adrenaclick authorized generic, and I'm not sure of its exact price, but I believe it's in the $450 range.
Okay. Is there anywhere, I'll ask Mr. Throckmorton, because I don't mean to ask you to pitch your competition. Is there any reason why since there are generics available, why people aren't producing this stuff for substantially less?
There are no generics in the way that I think you're speaking of them. The generics that are available are so-called authorized generics, which are brand name products that have chosen to remove their name from their label. Otherwise, they are.
So that's not what this is.
Our interest, I would say the broader interest that we have is in encouraging real competition, which means multiple manufacturers creating many different versions of epinephrine autoinjectors, including true generics approved under the abbreviated new drug application.
The so-called competition for EpiPen, you would really argue is not as good or is not the same thing.
If you were looking just simply at the numbers of manufacturers in the area, there are 2 manufacturers currently making epinephrine autoinjectors for prescription in the U.S. There's a third product that's approved that was voluntarily withdrawn last fall because of some manufacturing issues. If they address those manufacturing issues, they would be able to come back onto the market also.
And you expect them to, given that presumably there's a high markup here?
We are offering any assistance that we can to them to do exactly that.
Now, my next question for Ms. Bresch, kind of a more difficult question, and I'm not suggesting any governmental problem, but I read a book a little while ago by Charles Murray. I don't know if you're familiar with him, famous author. He talked about the moral decline of America. And a lot of that moral decline, he focused on what I'll call the underclass and a lifestyle that is not something that many people in my age group had when we were growing up. But he focused a little bit on the upper class. And one of the things he focused on, which I think maybe collectively isn't a huge amount of money, maybe it adds, a penny to each prescription of drugs you have, but I think it's bad for the fabric of society. Now, I realize it's legal, and I'm not just targeting you because it's common across the board. It came up earlier that, you're making whatever, $19 or $20 million a year, and that's fine. Maybe that's a half cent out of every prescription you guys make. But the point Murray made is there was a time in this country where chief executives got along making a lot less, and they apparently make a lot less in sizable companies around the globe. And I think the point he made was this is a sign of greed, and while it may be a relatively small amount for every person in the country, it probably tears a little bit at the moral fabric as people who work for companies and make relatively small amounts of money look at the chief executive making more money than anybody could possibly imagine. Do you ever feel guilty or have pangs of guilt making such a large sum of money, not as somebody who founded the company, but as an employee who really doesn't have a lot of risk yourself?
Look, I am blessed and fortunate. I've been working at this company for 25 years and representing 40,000 employees. So what Mylan has continued to provide access to multiple medications here in the U.S., over 600 products.
I know, and I'm sure there are many employees who work for you who do wonderful things, valuable scientists who are saving people's lives. I'm just saying, as you walk around the cubicles and see all the people making $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 a year, do you ever feel guilty that you and the board of directors and such have arranged to have you make $20 million a year?
I love that Mylan is trying to make a difference every day in what we do and how much product and how much access we are bringing, and the savings to this country alone, which over the last decade have been $180 billion.
Probably more the scientists who work for than you, but you understand what I'm saying. Maybe you don't understand. And maybe you're very good and maybe you're worth it. I think one of the things that frustrates a lot of Americans is there are a lot of people who even run their companies into the ground and make tens of millions of dollars. But I'm just going to ask you to comment again. Do you think it's good for the moral fabric of society and the idea that we want people to believe in the free economy system when in a business some people make $20 million a year?
I think to your point, the free market system and being a well-run company and delivering great shareholder value is part of that free market system.
I'm sure they're getting good value. You see what I'm saying? Maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. There are a lot of people out there, we're going to election season here, there are a lot of people out there who think the system is in part broke, and in part it's broke because they're working their butt off and doing very valuable things, and maybe they're even told to take cuts in pay, and they see a chief executive making a huge amount of money, way more proportionately than even adjusting for inflation, than chief executives made 50 years ago, and as I understand it, more than they make in other Western countries. And I think it grates at some people. I think it causes distrust in our system. I'm not suggesting we take away your freedom to make that amount of money. I'm just saying in all walks of life there are people who have the capability of making more and voluntarily say, I don't need that amount of money. And I just wondered if you had any comments on the system that we have in America where so many chief executives, not just you, seem to be making far more money than I think anybody would even know what to do with. And that's my only question.
And other than commenting that, yeah, the free market system I hope that there are companies that are definitely giving back and creating access and providing many things. And like I said, I go back to Mylan and what we have been able to create, and with 80 billion doses capacity and building up to lower those healthcare costs. So
I'll take it you're not answering the question means a little bit deep inside you are embarrassed at what you're making.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Your last comment about reducing the price I find offensive and inaccurate, but let me go first. Is EpiPen, is it a brand drug or is it a generic drug?
EpiPen is a brand drug.
Does that mean it's an innovator drug?
You mean based on CMS classification, it's a non-innovator drug?
Wait. Non-innovator drugs are often are really generics, correct?
The definition, the CMS has a statutory definition for innovator and non-innovator drugs.
So you think it's a branded product, but it's a non-innovator drug for the purpose of CMS?
Yes, that's how it's classified.
And you're familiar that Mylan had to settle a $118 million settlement with the Department of Justice back in 2009, right? Yes.
I'm not familiar with, I'm trying to, what settlement?
With the Department of Justice to resolve allegations that Mylan had underpaid the rebate obligations in the Medicaid prescription drug rebate program with respect to several other Mylan products, not EpiPen. But you're familiar with that?
I'm not recalling the settlement that you're speaking of.
This is the Justice Department. I'll ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record, dated Monday, October 19th, 2009. Justice News. 4 pharmaceutical companies pay $124 million for submissions of false claims to Medicaid. Without objection, so ordered. Have you or anybody at Mylan spoken with CMS?
Yes, there's been conversations with CMS.
Have you had any of those conversations with CMS
I have.
about EpiPen or the generic EpiPen?
I have not.
Have you spoken with anybody at Health and Human Services about EpiPen?
I have not.
Nobody.
No.
Has anybody at your company been in negotiations or discussions with CMS regarding EpiPen?
Yes, people at the company have talked to staff, has talked back and forth.
Who at your company has done that?
I think there's been several people, several people within the company that have had conversations.
Can you get us the names of those people?
I'm sure we could tell you, yes, I'm sure we could.
Within that 10 days?
I'm sure that we can do that.
We would also like the names of the people at CMS they've been in discussions with. Can you give us the names of the CMS people your staff has been working with?
I'm sure we can. Like I said, I've not had any of those.
10 days reasonable?
Sure.
Because the concern here is that, and the question really is, why is Mylan classifying EpiPen as a non-innovator drug?
When we acquired the product, it had been designated as a non-innovator drug, and there's been several points throughout time that have confirmed that status.
Do you believe that the generic that you're planning to introduce, when, by the way, do you hope to introduce the generic?
Certainly before the end of the year, over the
Okay,
next.
so then in the next 90
Couple of
days or
months,
something?
yes.
Okay. And are you going to work to classify that as a non-innovator drug or an innovator drug?
I'm not sure what that classification, and we haven't submitted that document. I mean, we haven't submitted yet because we haven't launched the product.
Okay, I need to spend a few minutes going through this chart that's right next to you. And I also need to help with you, and it's going to take a few minutes. I appreciate the indulgence of the committee to understand some of the definitions. Mr. Carter pointed out there's a revenue line here that seems to be missing, correct? Well, let me go first to the Mylan revenue, 274.
Yes.
Define that for me. Is that the average revenue per, what is that? 274, what number? Define
Yeah,
that.
the average revenue that Mylan receives per two-pack of
So in your letter to me and Mr. Cummings of September 15th, page 2, at the very top of the paragraph, I'll read here, you write, approximately 85% of consumers who are prescribed an EpiPen autoinjector pay less than $200 for a 2-unit pack, and a majority pay less than $50. Is that accurate?
I actually thought it was lower than the 200.
Okay.
I actually thought the majority of patients pay less than 100, and then many pay less than 50.
Well,
But that
they're
could-
both in the majority, right? 85% of consumers who are prescribed an EpiPen autoinjector pay less than $100 and for a 2-unit pack, and a majority pay less than $50.
Yes.
So how many of those that purchase the EpiPen, how many do it as a prescription? Do you have to have a prescription?
Yes,
to buy it?
you have to have a prescription.
So 100% of that universe.
Yes.
So if your average revenue to Mylan, your Mylan revenue, is $274, and the majority of people are paying less than $50, the minority is paying what to get it?
Well, it could range from, it could be anything, because all the plans, whether if you're uninsured or if you're, it would range because every plan is different.
So what's the highest number? Is 608 low?
It could, because we don't set the price that when the patient walks up to the pharmacy
I'm talking about
counter,
your
they pay.
revenue.
Our revenue is the $274 per pen on average.
Okay, so that's the average number, and you just told me that the majority pay less than $50. So I'm trying to figure out, with the remainder, what are they paying?
But the cost to the patient is different than what we're receiving.
Yes.
And I think that, and when,
But you just told me, look, you told me that you sell 4 million 2-packs, right? 8 million individual, 4 million 2-packs.
Correct.
If you multiply 4 million 2-packs times the $274, you miraculously get to roughly $1.1 billion.
correct.
So how is it that the majority of, according to what you wrote us, pay less than $50? If the majority of 4 million people, just more than 2 million people are paying less than $50, how do you get to an average of $274?
Because the patient, what the patient is paying is not coming back to Mylan. And when we were speaking earlier of the people, the middlemen in the system, so that's either the pharmacy benefit managers, retailers, wholesalers, insurers, is where, because I'm not interfacing directly from a price perspective or a pay perspective to the patient.
But you're representing to us that 85% of consumers are paying less than $100, and that a majority are paying less than $50. That's the reason you're having this hearing, is not because the public thinks they're getting a good deal. Look, I got a $600 product, and I only had to pay $48. That's not why you're here. They're telling us is they are having to pay much greater numbers.
And it's that growing minority that I spoke of earlier that is being faced now with the wholesale acquisition cost or more at the counter.
How do you define profit? What is profit to you?
So the $50 per pen profit is for the direct EpiPen-related cost. We didn't, there's no company allocation or anything like that off of that?
Well, but that's not what you wrote me. And you wrote this letter less than a week ago. Here's what you said. Among other things, this profit is used to fund research and development and to maintain and improve our facilities across Milan, in which we invest $1.2 billion this year alone, or more than $3 million every day. That's not the definition of profit.
No, I think what we were saying in there is that's how we reinvest the profit that we make. But I thought you were asking me how
When
the
you,
$50.
when there are 5 executives over 5 years that take out $300 million, where on your P&L does that show up? Does it show up in your profit line? Does it show up in EBITDA? Where does it show up?
Well, it's not coming out of, the $50 number I'm showing you per pen is taking no company allocation to that whatsoever.
But that's what you just wrote to me. You said this profit is used for R&D. We're supposed to believe that your $50 profit is funding R&D and facilities and all that? Because that's exactly, I just read to you verbatim what you wrote to me.
And we absolutely take our profits and reinvest in our business. I mean, to your point, this year alone, $750 million in R&D we're spending across bringing hundreds of products to the market.
When you take the $300 million that the 5 executives got, where on your P&L does that show up?
And I'm saying it's not, we didn't take any of that out of this $50. When we're showing you this
I'm not talking about the
profit.
$50, the whole thing. Come on, you amortize your fixed expenses and your operating expenses over everything, correct?
Correct, but that's what
Where
I'm
does
saying,
that show up in that spreadsheet? Tell me where that number is.
It's not on here. That's why it would be, $50 would be lower if we were taking those company allocations, like running the business, out of this. This is straight just EpiPen.
I've gone way past. I'm going to come back to this because your numbers are so askew. It really is troublesome. Let me recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much. You know, when Mr. Chiarelli appeared before us, he took the fifth. And to be frank with you, you might as well have taken the fifth too, with the kind of information that we've gotten here today. Because I don't think that I tell you, this reminds me of the game when it's like hiding the ball, and it's like a shell game, and we can't, you know, it seems like we can never figure out where the ball is. And as I said from the very beginning, I was concerned that we would be here in a rope-a-dope situation. Is worse. Is worse. See, in the rope-a-dope situation, the boxer sort of holds on and tries to get through, and then at the end he comes back and he wins. In this situation, not only are you holding on and trying to win, but in the end, you are placing us in a position where we're not making very much progress here at all. I'm telling you, I've been here 99% of this hearing, and I've practiced law for many years, and I'll tell you, I don't know what your lawyers are telling you, but I don't think that you have been frank with us. And I could understand it a little bit better if you didn't know what this hearing was all about. And I don't say those words lightly. Let me ask you a few questions to see if we might be able to move forward here a little bit. You know, your numbers just don't add up, and I think that's what's happened. I mean, if I could sum up this hearing, it would be the numbers don't add up. And it is extremely difficult to believe that you're making only $50 in profit when you just increased the price by more than $100 per pen. Do you have any internal company documents that track the total profits you have made off of EpiPen from 2007 when you acquired it until today? Do you have any of those documents?
Well, we certainly could. I, sitting here today, don't have a cumulative number, but I totally understand I know if I had only read everything that's been out there around the price, I can totally understand how perplexing it is and the system, and I would hope that while I don't have answers how to fix all of it, I think that I couldn't agree more. The transparency of the 608 down is needed across the board because patients have no visibility, pharmacists have, nobody's got a visibility of the value or what's being paid for what. And I think
can we hold on for that one little thing you just said? You talk about the value of the medication, right? You know, you can take that. I mean, when you talk about the value of a medication, I guess you're saying, well, if you have a certain medication, it'll keep you out of the hospital. Certain medication will save your life. I mean, where does that end? In other words, how do you put value on life? Are you following what I'm saying? Yeah, I could go on and on and on. So is that the measurement?
no, that's why I was saying
I mean, but you've said it 50 million times in this hearing, and it sounds like you're saying, because I'm able to save somebody from possibly going to the hospital or whatever, that's supposed to be incorporated in the value, and that's partly why we're able to charge these prices. And are you telling us that you're doing us a favor? That you're doing our constituents a favor by raising these prices?
I think hopefully what you'll see with the generic coming to the market is a
Now I'm talking about right
tremendous
now,
patient.
right now. I've got, the other night I was at a PTA meeting in my district, and I had a mother who has 3 children, and all of them use EpiPen. She has to have one set at home, and she has one at the school. And she sit there in tears because she's only making maybe $50,000 a year or less. And she's trying to figure out how she's going to afford this. And as I listen to you more and more, and you talk about, I think I wouldn't be so. I think I might be a little bit more trustful if I hadn't heard some of this before, or I hadn't read some of it before from people like Shirelli, who called us imbeciles. But now But when you present to me that you've got these assistance programs, as I see the assistance programs, and by the way, everybody comes in with the same story. It must be some playbook that you all use. And they say, oh, we've got an assistance program. We're going to help some people. And the next thing you know, they then use that to justify not bringing the prices down. You understand that?
I do. And
that's exactly what you come in here to do. You've done it. That's what you're doing. Are you going to go down on the price? Are you going to come back down on the price at all? No. Put aside the generic stuff. What about coming down on the price?
We believe that the generic was much more meaningful to make sure we're reaching those patients so that across all the access points. And one thing I would say, and I know you've had other companies in here, and I know orphan drugs, there's been conversations across this. I would say, just as an example, Mylan's had an orphan drug product called Cystagon on the market for years and years, and it treats a very small number of patients, cystinosis less than, I believe it's now 500. I mean, it's a very, very rare disorder. And that price has stayed around $1,200 to $2,000 annually to provide the medicine needed every day, where a company came on the market 3 years ago at $300,000 to treat that same patient population with just a more convenient dose. So I understand that there are the things that you've seen and companies that you've spoken to, but I would hope that you would be able to look at Mylan and the role that we've played with generics, the role that I play if I talk about our Cystagon experience, or trying to make sure that the access point for people who are both carrying it, but in schools and in other public places, so that there is an EpiPen there or an epinephrine auto-injector there for anyone who needs it whenever.
We appreciate all of that. But does Marlin have a slogan of seeing is believing?
Yes,
You do?
yes.
Seeing is believing. That's what we want to do. We want to see the records. We want to see the records. You're refusing to say how much profit your company makes. You are repeating industry talking points with no substance whatsoever. You're trying to claim that your massive price increases are actually a good thing for American families. Our committee requested documents from Marlin, but so far you failed to produce everything we've asked for. As you just said, Marlin's slogan is seeing is believing. So, in summary, Ms. Bresch, will you agree today, I know the Chairman has asked you to produce some documents within the next 10 days and some information in the next 10 days. Will you agree today to produce all the documents the committee has requested so we can confirm what's going on here?
We will certainly produce everything that we can.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means. We've asked for specific documents.
And I know we've been responsive, and I know that we're still, this has been real time. I understand that we've produced thousands of documents, a couple thousand documents, and I know that there's more that we have to produce. And I'm saying that I'm sure we will produce everything that we possibly can to give you the visibility and the transparency to the numbers that I'm showing you here today.
And so that we will be clear, we want your agreements and your contracts with manufacturers. We want suppliers, distributors, PBMs, and any of your other partners in the distribution channel for EpiPen. Will you produce those?
I can't speak to all of those contracts from the confidentiality agreements in some of those, the competitive information in some of those, but that's why I've got to rely on the lawyers who are producing these documents to make sure we're staying compliant with some of the other provisions in the contracts.
So you will get us what you got. I know you're all lawyered up back there, but you're going to make sure that you consult with your lawyers to get us what you can?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. I find the chart very interesting. Can you hold it up a little more? I can't see the very bottom of it.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got wholesale acquisition costs at $608, rebates and allowances. This is what you give back to patients, and so that's minus $334?
No, this rebates and allowances are all the things that you were speaking of, the PBM, retail, that's all the rebates and things that flow to all the.
So you're giving a rebate to a PBM?
Yes,
You're giving a rebate to a PBM?
yes.
That's where that comes in there.
It's part of it.
It's part of it.
It's in there.
Okay, so you're giving what are allowances?
So all of the fees, there's wholesaler fees, discounts, rebates, that's just capturing everything that's between the 608 and the 274, which is what Mylan receives as revenue.
Okay. Are you getting any rebates from PBMs?
And that's what I said. I didn't want to give you an inaccurate number. There's no.
Okay, I understand that, but that was not my question. I didn't ask you for a number. I said, are you getting rebates from a PBM?
And across our business.
Yes or no, are you getting rebates from a PBM?
But for EpiPen, we are paying rebates to the PBM.
Are you getting rebates from a PBM?
If we're not getting EpiPen-specific rebates from an EpiPen from being the manufacturer.
So you are not getting rebates from a PBM?
I don't believe so on, like, for instance, if we're just talking about EpiPen.
You just told me earlier you were going to produce documents that would give us the numbers.
But, so what I don't want to confuse is we're a manufacturer, we're also an employer. So we have a PBM that is managing, say, all of the employees in the U.S. So what I didn't want to give you is an inaccurate number. If there was rebates that come from the PBM as an employer versus the manufacturing, we're paying the rebates for the products.
This is amazing. This is amazing. I have never in my life seen such a shell game. I'm speechless, and that doesn't happen very often.
And that's why we've said and encouraged, to your point, that transparency and where that's flowing and how it works, so that you do know what the cost is.
Okay, let me ask one more question, and I'll stop. Can you hold it up again?
Sure.
You took an oath earlier today saying you would tell the truth.
Yes.
Is that the truth? $50 per pen?
Yes.
That is the truth.
Our profit's approximately $50 per pen.
Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Just a few questions as we wrap up. On that chart again, I would like to see a definition of rebates and allowances. I'd like to see a definition for each of those numbers. Right out, for instance, cost of goods sold, what do you include and not include in that number?
That's everything that we're paying to our partner for the cost of goods sold.
So that's it? That's all? What else is in the cost of goods sold?
Because we have a partner on the product.
Yes.
So we pay a price to.
Do you buy
get
it
the
as a
product.
finished product?
Yes.
So you don't manufacture it?
No, we're partnered on the product.
And so you pay them $69
Per 2-pack,
per 2-pack,
for 2 EpiPens.
for 2 EpiPens. So that's your turnkey price.
Yes.
When you call direct EpiPen auto-injector costs of $105, what is in that number?
So sales, marketing, the disease awareness, so everything that would be directed to EpiPen or around anaphylaxis awareness, all the access programs. So that would be all-inclusive of everything directly related to EpiPen.
And the number for research and development, your fixed costs, your variable costs at your company, where does that number show up?
So that's not on here. These are just direct EpiPen-related costs. So I mean, if you look at the entire company, obviously, that was the point I was trying to just say earlier, that this is looking at a product on a standalone basis versus saying it takes a company or human resources or other entities to sell the product. So this doesn't take any of that into consideration. This is just giving you an approximate profit on just from an EpiPen-related perspective.
And not to pick so much on your own personal compensation, none of that comes out of this number, these numbers. You want us to believe that your profit is less than $50.
If you took company allocation and all that in, yes.
I don't know who the investors of this company are, but man, I'm telling you, this is some fishy business, because these things do not add up. We would expect a very professional presentation on your P&L, and these dumbed-down versions here do not make sense without the definitions in here. It's just, it just feels like you're not being candid and honest with Congress, who's asking you for some very basic information. And your attorney's over there scrambling, all uncomfortable. But you know what? We just want some basic information. You dug this hole for yourself. You guys dug this hole for yourself. We asked for some simple, basic information. Don't tell me that you're pulling all your R&D costs and all of your fixed expenses and all your facilities and all of that out of your profit line. Any responsible P&L would lay this out for us. You can make this thing go away by being honest and candid, and we just don't think you are. That's why we're in I don't know what number hour here, and we're asking you to provide more information. And don't come here and tell us that, you're doing the world a favor by increasing the price from $125 to over $600, and everybody else is making money but poor old Milan. It just doesn't smell right, doesn't pass the basic sniff test.
And Chairman, I don't think we said we weren't making money. I think all we were trying to set the record straight as to the dollar amounts that have been out there around the 608 price to show that what we actually receive is the 274, and to walk down that. And we will happily provide the definitions and that transparency to show you the $50.
And I just don't buy the idea that the majority of consumers are paying less than $50. I mean, that's what you're telling us.
Right, and that's what
Trust
the
but
data
verify,
show.
seeing is believing, the Milan way. Show it to us. Show it to us.
And that is what our data shows, and we will.
I know. Well, we haven't seen it, so I appreciate you providing that to us. I have two quick FDA questions here. Dr. Throckmorton, how many abbreviated new drug applications are pending before the FDA right now?
2,300 actions are currently before.
And how long is the average wait time for an approval of a generic drug?
I'd like to get that information and get it back to you as soon as I can.
Can you define what, in fairness, what I asked Ms. Bresch, what's a reasonable time before we start raising the red flag here?
Can I?
10 days, is that?
10 days sounds like a common number, if that would be good enough for you.
That would be, we would appreciate that, those two things.
Right.
Mr. Cummings.
Yeah, just briefly, Ms. Bresch, you mentioned that you got some confidentiality agreements. That doesn't apply to us, Congress. You know that, right? Hello?
No, I didn't know
No,
that
now you
there's
know.
confidentiality.
Yeah, that doesn't apply to us. And I'm sure your attorneys will work that through. I just hope that, I just want to go back and briefly as I close with what I said before. I've asked you every kind of way, would the prices come down? And you basically made it clear basically you fall in the same category of Shirelli and the valiant people. They come to the hearing, they go through the motions. At least you tried to answer some questions. But in the end, our constituents still suffer. And I hope that when you fly back on your jet, you'll think about that mother that I told you about, or the people that Mr. Carter talked about a few minutes ago, trying to just take care of their families. And, I try to really look at things from a very, in a way, a very balanced way. But I can tell you that I've been on this committee for 20 years, and very rarely have I seen a situation where it seems that we could not get the answers that we were looking for to this degree. And what that does is it goes against credibility. And that's a very, very difficult hurdle. And so that's why we really do need to see the documents. And what we're trying to do is, and I don't, you make all the money you want. I just don't like the idea of it being done in a way that's not transparent. And I don't like it being done on the backs of people who can at least afford it. And you keep trying to convince us that Milan is doing a great favor. But Milan's making money. Milan's doing fine. But to come in and to say that some of the things that you've said, it just makes me, feel that maybe you don't think we're that bright. And that's a sad commentary. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to receiving your answers and documents.
Yes, we will be following up both of you within 10 days. Committee stands adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, buddy.